I think we'll just start. I have actually a question for you, Markus.
All right.
I'll start with you, and I hope like the talk would go amongst you. I'm not the expert here at all, so let's see how it goes. So I've heard the concept of zero trust. How would you personally define the concept of zero trust? On a high level, how would we implement it?
Good question. For me, to explain zero trust in a simple way, in a simple manner, it's about not trusting any identity or anything in your network. So it's sort of like having a firewall within your firewall. You separate all the networks and try to segment it mostly. So it's kind of in the way where you try to not trust anybody in your internal network. So for your application, you have to verify your identity, and even amongst the applications or the APIs, you have to verify who you are all the time. So it's pretty difficult to set up and to configure. So I wouldn't recommend it for anybody who doesn't know what they're doing, because it's really, really advanced. So that's how, sort of the easy way to explain it for my part.
I think zero trust is like my understanding, because I'm new to zero trust, everyone's new. It's not like a product that you can buy, it's a way that you do something.
Yes.
So yeah, you can't like buy zero trust and then deploy the zero trust tool. It's a way of doing stuff.
Yes.
So it's more like a philosophy than a product. I saw everyone starting to talk about zero trust, and it's like, what is this thing? And I'm like, oh, it's just kind of like a way to do things. And actually, when I started reading about it, I was like, oh, we already do some of this stuff. Like within our environment, we have our Redis cache that I talked about earlier.
Yep.
Like only the servers that can talk to it need to talk to it, and we check who they are.
Yes.
Right. So rather than just having like the internal network and everything can talk to everything, it's about like isolating off what can talk to what, and then checking it is what you think it is.
Yes.
I think that's my take on zero trust.
I agree.
But you have to put trust somewhere.
Yes.
There has to be some trust, or you won't have a distributed application without trust.
Yep.
And my immediate take on zero trust is kind of the principle of just assuming that everything in your environment already may be breached, right? So when you create a zero trust architecture, you maybe have one database somewhere, your application somewhere else, and you're supposed to not trust your database, but you have to do it at some point. So where do you define that trust? That's a very difficult question. And I think the purpose of it is to limit the blast radius, right, when something goes wrong. So I think that's kind of, you need to identify what to protect, what's sensitive, I guess, to figure out where to put the trust. And when you can answer that questions, or those questions, what are my sensitive data, and also where do I put the trust, then you can start blocking everything else, I guess.
Do we see any kind of, I mean, this seems like a lot of hassle for maybe not that much. Do we see any use cases where this can actually be used?
I think for a lot of it, like, so I've started learning about zero trust and then realized we actually kind of already do some of it. So I think there are a lot of good practices within the concept. I don't know if like the difficulties you say around, completely controlling everything and restricting everything. I don't know if we'll ever get to like, zero trust certified or whatever, whatever the thing. I don't know if there's a thing. But I think looking at it as a guiding principle, even if we don't get to like 100% zero trust, right? Getting to 50% zero trust would be way better. And a lot of the stuff, my company publishes our penetration test reports. And like 2 years ago, we had an issue where our approach of restricting internal comms between environments actually took it from being like critical data breach to, you should fix this. So it does work. I just think there's a little bit of buzzword. Everyone's like, ooh, zero trust. It's the new hot thing. It's like, actually, we were kind of already doing most of this, and it is a really good idea. Now we just have a construct, and it's called zero trust.
I've been working at the National Security Agency in Norway, so I've sort of dig through it and know what it's all about. So the deal there is that we have our own internal network, and nothing can access it. We don't have access to the web. And from there, you can build zero trust in a good way. Once you want access to the internet, it's a whole different story, and it's much more difficult to configure. So that's my take on it.
I guess it's easier also to start with a new application, because then you can start from scratch, only assigning the trust and the accesses you need as you build your application. It's much more difficult to go the other way around, make something already functional, access trust. But zero trust. But you can also, I guess, have zero trust internally on a system. It doesn't have to be a distributed thing. Like if you run one application on your system, you can make the rest of the system don't trust that application. I guess that's that's kind of what you do with Docker or virtualizing things. That's kind of like a zero trust approach as well. One example that I can quickly think of is Deno, if you've heard about that. It's kind of like a competitor to Node.js. It's called Deno. And Deno, what I like about Deno is that when you create a new process there, you actually have to specify access. You have to, does your application need to access disk? You need to explicitly give it that access, to grant it those permissions. Network, you have to grant it access to the network. And I like that very much, contradictionally to Node.js, where you just have access to everything the user of the running process has access to. So, yeah.
If we look at a lot of existing terms, like things from my history in security, we have things like, secure by default, which you just kind of explained, and then we have privilege management, looking at whether something needs a privilege it has by default. We have, like the concept of least privilege as well. So, and I think a lot of these are now like parts of the kind of the zero trust idea, where all of those things are part of zero trust. You want things with the least access, with the least privilege, and you can't just therefore assume, oh, it's on the network, it's trusted. So I feel like we're kind of like merging these ideas into one kind of concept, one program that will guide us on everything.
Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. Moving on, talking about security in general. Scott, is there like one single element companies fail at more than the others?
Usually recognizing that security is important.
That's a good start.
That's usually the. I kind of say that joking, and now I'm kind of serious. Actually, it is most of the time. Like my biggest hurdle is getting people to care enough about security, and I think as like someone that's passionate about security, I do this a lot. But if you look at your own interests, like a dentist thinks that everybody should care about cleaning their teeth as much as and no one does, right? So I appreciate like not everyone will care about security like me, but you've got to get the basics right. You've got to like brush your teeth once a day and maybe, do a couple of other things. We're not going to be like crazy, like crazy security people. But I think we're getting to the point now where we can start to see that there's this expectation that everybody has to have like this minimal security knowledge. We don't need everybody in an organization to be a security expert, but everybody has to have a little bit.
Right.
We've got to have that underlying knowledge where we all understand security is a thing and we have a minimal role to play. And I think that's the big change that I'm seeing at the minute with the organizations that I work with.
Okay. So Stig and Markus, you're both out at clients. Is there any pattern you see?
Yeah, it's kind of, my take on it is that what they fail at the most is evaluating the risks, because they have to have a understanding of the risks and what to mitigate and what to not to mitigate, and what you can accept of your risks. And if you talk besides that, I think it's the most important part is to get to see what's happening. If you see an attack or discover it, you have to be able to mitigate it and to handle it. And that's sort of kind of the biggest problems today, I think.
Right.
A lot of people want better security, pen tests, and want to make sure their systems are secure, but they're going to get hacked for sure. And then you have to mitigate it, and you have to fix it, and you have to understand what's going on, what is breached, and you have to roll back to their normal state.
Right.
And that's a very hard
process.
Hard process,
Yeah.
and most people fail to do that.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, I agree with what's been said so far. I kind of like the general answer is that they should at least, or they fail to even recognize security. I guess that's the default answer here. But to me, it's also about failing to assign resources, because that's what it's all about. You have, as a business or as a development team manager or project manager or whatever, you need to assign resources to security. You need to give your developers time to harden your applications to do security right. And I've talked about this before, and I think the main reason why it's like this is because many people, at least in upper management, they don't really see the true value of security. It doesn't give them anything. It doesn't necessarily give your product anything before someone tries to hack it, right? But then it's too late if you didn't assign resources. So it's maybe hard for someone to get permission to assign time and money and developers on security. But I was sitting at home thinking really hard on this question, because the question is really, name one single thing that applies to every business. And I think the true answer there, at least to me, is privacy. What's the first thing that happens when I, as a developer or as a consultant, goes to a customer? You have to create an account there. We use Slack. That's not very good on privacy. And they don't necessarily take care of privacy in their applications as well. Maybe for the same reason, it doesn't give your product any value, and it doesn't make your product better. But perhaps you get some more privacy-aware users if you mind privacy. But still, I feel that's the one thing that lacks almost everywhere: the privacy take on things.
And I think your point on, like, it doesn't give your product anything, right? Like, it's not, no one goes and says, like, please can we use like Slack Private Edition or Slack Secure Edition? No one thinks about it like that. One of the really interesting things I see now is like with iPhone adverts, certainly in the UK and other countries I travel, it's like the most secure phone and like your data is your data. We're only just starting to see people think about security and privacy as an actual feature and a thing. And one of the common examples that I make is that investing in security is like having an insurance policy. You don't need it until you crash the car, and then everybody wants insurance. And before that, like insurance policy, maybe we don't have one of these insurance policies. But when you need it really bad.
Yeah, but it's sort of the same thing with the risk management. Leadership understand money and how you invest money. So you take high risk, high reward. It's the same thing with security. If you have a lot of risks, it's not a high reward, it's the exact opposite. So, as you say, as an insurance, you use some money, spend some money to secure your systems and your risks.
And we've been bad in, as a person in the security industry, it's always a really expensive solution, and we make things sound complicated because then we can charge more money for them. And I think we've made security very unapproachable. And when we talk about security, everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is going to be really difficult or really expensive or take lots of resources. And actually, just to do the basics, it really doesn't. But we've made it very not approachable as a topic, I feel. And, threat modeling, like the assessment of risk and things, we say, oh, we're going to do a threat modeling exercise, right? And people are like, oh my gosh, this sounds expensive. And really, it's like we could sit down now and create a threat model in 10 minutes.
Of course.
So I think that the industry is partly to blame for this, this lack of approachability.
All right. Let's move topic again. DevSecOps, a new buzzword. I'm not that familiar. Stig, could you give me the highlights? Or
is it new though?
Who knows?
It's starting to get a bit old, maybe. No, I don't know. It's also known as SecDevOps and DevOpsSec, if that helps.
Okay, yeah, sure, thanks.
And some people separate on where they put the sec, depending on where in the pipeline or where in the development process they do the security. But my quick Google check gives me most results for DevSecOps, so I think I'll stick with that.
Okay.
And it is to identify every step of your development process and see where can we implement security checks, hardening steps, preferably automated so you don't have to do manual hardening jobs every time. And with these new pipelines, GitHub Action, DevOps, it's to integrate these security tools into your DevOps pipeline. And there are some general rules you should follow, I guess. One is to never, ever allow anyone to commit directly to production. block your master or main or production branch immediately, and you should probably do it with your acceptance test branch as well, or maybe even development branch. You want some other developers to review the code that's checked in, because if one of the developers' credentials are stolen, or one of the developers are mad at management and they start checking in malicious stuff, it's very good that you have another developer, at least another developer that did code review, not just for the technical quality of the code, but also to stop malicious code from entering your code base. But we've seen these Unicode attacks where you can hide malicious code and you don't see it because it looks like white space. So how do you defend against that? Maybe mark all the text, I don't know.
Yeah, in terms of that specific one, unsure, but the general kind of like DevSecOps thing, again, I feel like we're a little bit back into zero trust, where as you kind of explain that, I'm hearing lots of other principles that I already do as good practice, and it's kind of like a wrapper term for several other things together.
Yeah, it is.
So, I love the buzzwords because everyone gets really excited about zero trust and we're going to do DevSecOps, and everyone's like, yeah. But if I come in and be like, we're going to do security, everyone's like, no. So, it's, I kind of like these words and the inspiration they give people and the excitement they give people, but actually I feel like they're a tiny little bit buzzwordy.
It's like shoehorning security into...
Yeah. It's like, finding a way to like sneak it in without them noticing.
Yeah. Is this something every team should be doing, or is it just a hype?
I think they should be doing. I mean, of course, you should have secure parts of your development cycle, and
it might not be called DevSecOps, but you might be doing like 3 or 4 of the principles, and that's better than the next company who's doing 0 and they get hacked before me. So I don't think it's an absolute. I think it's such a cliche term, and I heard this once, but like security is not a destination. Security is the journey. It's how you get there, not it's not some final state that can be achieved. And as long as you're doing more than the person next to you, like they'll get hacked first, so I'm good.
Yeah. How secure do you want to be?
Yeah, more secure than you.
Okay.
But I recently saw an interesting blog post about these pipelines being hacked. That at least in open source projects, where on GitHub, where if you contribute and you, for instance, you can craft a malicious commit message, and when you submit that, there's something wrong in one of the pipeline steps. There's a coding error in the pipeline steps, so your commit message will then take over the entire pipeline, and then you can do everything you want within the pipeline. So it's not easy, right? You actually introduce another step of processing with these pipeline steps.
Which you need to secure, right?
So yes, so you need to secure those as well. You need a DevSecOps for the DevSecOps.
Right, okay. Moving on.
DevSecOps, is it? Like,
It seems like a rabbit hole. We're moving on. Stig, again, when you're sort of like the most developer around the table right now, when designing systems, should you design for not if, but when you're getting hacked or attacked?
As with everything, it depends, I guess. But I think it's a good approach to start with that mindset, to design for when you get attacked. Just assume you will get attacked. And to some extent, you can never defend yourself entirely anyways, right? So it's always good to, with 0 days, you never know who managed to enter your system. Yeah. So just assume that you will be breached at one point, and try to do what you can to reduce the blast radius, as we talked about earlier. Do what you can to prevent further damage when something goes wrong. And again, that has something with the zero trust model as well, I guess. I think it's very wrong to assume that you won't be breached.
Yeah. There's no such thing as secure. Like, it's just it's a common misconception, again, that I see. Is like, oh, yes, like, we want to make our applications secure. And I'm like, well, okay, let's just cross that out, because like you'll never get there. It's not an achievable state. It's a question of degrees of confidence. And, if we only have a degree of confidence that we're safe, then we acknowledge at some point when we will get attacked and breached, how are you going to handle it? And I think, you're absolutely right. Like, there's no there is no secure state, therefore we should always have some idea that, what are we going to do when the day comes?
Yeah. I had an incident with a hospital where there was an attacker in the networks, and you get the question, what do we do? So then we bring up the network sheets and see, okay, what's been breached? Yeah, and you start to ask question, okay, what does this server do? What is this? Is this a hard monitor? Is this critical? Can somebody die if I shut this down? They didn't know. Yeah. So what do? You have to start all over. You have to build up the whole entire infrastructure again because you can't do anything. And that is very, very bad because you can suddenly kill somebody.
You tried to shut it off.
Yeah. I didn't want to touch anything. So
I don't hear it. Oh, there we go. Turn it back on.
But as with the kommune, what's that in English?
Municipality or something.
Thank you. Østre Toten, they got hacked, and what happened is that all their servers and systems shut down. Even the hospitals didn't have any networks, any systems. So in the hospital beds, they had these little bells to call for the nurse. So that says a little bit about security in municipality. I can't say it. Municipality.
Yes, it's hard. It's a hard one.
It's a hard word.
Thank you.
But I assume again it's all about knowing your values as well. I mean, you as a entrepreneur or developer, you know that you have limited resources, and you can make every application as hardened as you want it. But again, it's all about these resources and assigning resources to security. So identify what's sensitive in my applications and start there.
Yep.
Start, how can I protect this? How can I prevent this from leaking? Where's my sensitive data at?
Right.
Where are my values?
Okay. Moving on, password managers. One-stop shop for all your password can be automated with multiple MFA, two-factor authentication. Scott, any thoughts? Good, bad?
Yeah, so I actually...
Better than same password everywhere?
I mean, yeah, for sure. So, like, I get this a lot when I'm doing training or workshops or demos, and I need to log into a system. I open my password manager, and all the fields are redacted, so no one can really see anything. But, like, one thing I get pulled on a lot is, number one, should we use a password manager, right? It's like, if this one thing gets compromised, then, I am screwed because, like, all 600 passwords are in here. But I'm looking at it and thinking, if I have the same password everywhere and I have to remember them versus the security of the password manager, and neither of them achieve 100% security. It's just that the password manager is higher than me trying to remember them. So it's an improvement, so I do it. So it's not, like I said a minute ago, nothing is 100% secure, nothing's unbreakable. I don't use a password manager because it can't be hacked. I use it because it's better than the alternative.
Right.
And then it's the same again in terms of two-factor authentication. So I have the token generator on my phone here, but I also back up my seeds in 1Password. And if I'm, sat at my laptop, I don't need to be like, oh, where did my phone? I need to go find my phone, right? Because the tokens are right here. So it's more convenient, and sometimes convenience trumps security.
Right.
So it's a question of balances. You just need to look at it and say, am I better if I do this, right? And people chase the absolute of perfection all the time, and you'll never get there. So I look at it and I say, is this better than what I do now? And if the answer is yes, even by 1%, then I will do it. Yeah.
Just a general note regarding the backup codes from two-factor authentication. There has been cases of people where you then have both eggs in one basket in the password manager. You get both the password and the security codes, which means your two-factor authentication doesn't mean anything if you store them in the same place.
Yep. And you're absolutely correct. If you put either the backup codes or the seed and have the generator in there, like you're essentially back down to one-factor authentication, and it's your password manager. But I'm still better than if I didn't have it. So we still kind of come back to that point of, what if I was just remembering all my passwords, or I didn't have two-factor authentication? So I acknowledge that it is not as perfect as it could be if I just flat out refuse to have any 2FA seeds in my password manager, but that would be really inconvenient, and then I probably just wouldn't have 2FA.
Yeah, no.
So it's...
My point was just, I at least tend to store the backup codes and the passwords in two different encrypted systems.
Yeah, and it's a great, if that is within your kind of like comfort on the difficulty. That's absolutely great. I'm kind of pushing more towards hardware 2FA now anyway. So I have a YubiKey, the miniature one in the drive. So I always have that with me, and that helps me because it's convenient. So for accounts that support like FIDO authentication and U2F keys, I have that level of security. But for the ones that don't, I do have my seed in my password manager.
I'll try to be a bit mean now, but do you have these two encrypted systems on the same device?
No.
Okay, then I can't be mean with you.
Entirely off all devices, and only go and download them if I ever need them.
Okay, yeah, very good. Because
but you could print them out. Like printing them would be an equivalent security thing, I think.
Yes, I mean you could also travel around with a safe and all passwords.
Let's go, baby. Let's go.
That's a safe password manager right there. No, but when it comes to this all eggs in one basket, you can move the question one step up, and that was the purpose with my question. Where do you have your password manager? You have it on your phone. Where do you have your bank ID? It's on your phone. Is the password manager really the all eggs in one basket device? Or is it your phone or your laptop or where you have these password manager application? It's hard to tell.
That's why I have a YubiKey.
Yep. Move it off device. The YubiKeys are so great, and they're unphishable. Like password managers can still be phished, and 2FA tokens in password managers can still be phished. But like proper, FIDO U2F is like 99.999% unphishable, which is the biggest risk anyway. Actually, it's not.
I actually read something about Google implementing YubiKeys for all their employees.
Yeah.
And their phishing attacks were working, so they could get their credentials. But after that, they had zero,
and it's
phishing.
still zero up to now.
That's insane. So it just tells you that.
Because with the YubiKey, like you have to put it in and press the button to type the code in or to respond to the challenge. But the key can look at the domain and know if it's the correct domain, even if you've misread the URL, right? So if you're on like google.com, the key will be like no code because there's too many O's or something. So it's yeah.
Do you have an overview of how many or how well supported YubiKey is across different platforms?
We've been kind of stalled on waiting for WebAuthn support in the browsers, and now we have that. We should start to see it being a lot more common in web applications, which is where my kind of focus is. So now that the browser has the ability to directly communicate in with the key, and you can just like bind multiple keys, one key, you should have at least two, into your account. I've got like 4, one in each device, right? So I just like tap the side of the key and in I go.
Are there any alternatives? Because this is one company, right?
Yeah, so YubiKey is the brand. There is like, WebAuthn is the software implementation on the client. FIDO is like the industry body that defines the standards. Google use a company called Fission or something. I'm not sure how to say that. So there are other brands. There aren't many, but it's not a big market yet either. So I think that will come. Are
there any risks if YubiKey gets hit by ransomware and shuts down their entire operation in one day? Are there any risks for you and your account? Or
no, only that you can't buy more tokens. Like each token has its cryptographic identity. That gets bound to the host, and then it's just basically a key embedded in the device.
And the host doesn't need to contact YubiKey servers.
No, you're just essentially cryptographically signing. It's like a miniature HSM, kind of, and you're just signing challenges and responses.
Right.
All right, final question before we...
there was one question.
There was a question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just regarding, because I also own YubiKeys, the main thing I sort of, that I found hard about them is the fear of what do you do when you lose it.
Yeah.
Because then you're
screwed.
Really lost.
So I have like the mini one in my laptop. I have a spare one in my bag with a big like remove before flight label. I have like one in my PC at home, one in my MacBook, and then I have a small safe at my house where I have a backup key. So if I lose all of them or something, I've always got one that I can get back in with.
So whenever you create an account for anything, you need to fetch all your private keys.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep.
How well does it work with apps on phone? I mean, you can plug it in your phone, right?
It's usually NFC. So mine are NFC.
Right. Oh,
you
yeah,
just
you
tap
said
the.
that. Yeah, of
Or the Google Fashion ones are Bluetooth as well.
We're moving on to the final
Sorry.
question. You guys can nerd about YubiKeys later. This one's for Markus. Any clear emerging trends in the threat landscape? Coming new trends, or is it just the same old?
I mean, from my knowledge, for the moment, it's a lot knowledge about Ukraine and Russian spyware and hacks. And besides that, it's not so much the old parts. I think the most trending right now is still ransomware and these crypto miners, as you told us about earlier. So besides that, it's like all the 0 days that are trying to exploit, like Log4Shell or Spring4Shell. These are pretty new ones. And you even have other kernel exploits for Linux, but those are all based on different parts of the hacking. So I would say ransomware is the most trending right now.
Stig, you have seen any trends?
I think I've seen a trend on attacking tool chains, development tool chains, software tool chains, package managers.
True.
And it makes sense because more and more companies are moving to the cloud, moving their values away from their on-premises systems, and it's much more difficult to hack Amazon than it is to hack a developer. And that's also something I noticed when I'm placed in a project at the customer. They give me an account and I have access to everything. Of course, am I an attractive target for a hacker? So I think there's a trend trying to breach developers, trying to breach pipelines, development systems, and of course supply chain attacks trying to take down your dependencies.
Like SolarWinds.
Like SolarWinds, yes. I also think there's been a lot of activity from VMware lately, a lot of new security patches from VMware, so that may indicate a trend on attacking virtualized environments, which also makes sense if you think of the cloud movement. So, yeah, escaping containers, escaping virtual machines, I guess.
Yeah.
Scott, any new thing on the horizon?
For me, yeah, so I've been trying, my focus is obviously mainly on web app security and through Report URI looking at like hostile JavaScript injection attacks. And as I said this morning, attackers, they were always looking for cross-site scripting in your application and trying to find the vulnerability in your app. And that these attack groups now, especially MageCart, which is kind of, it looks like 4 or 5 distinct groups based on the code that we see each group using. And they've realized now that going after the supply chain is where the money is. And now supply chain attacks are becoming so common and so enormous. If I go after, I'm not going to hack Amazon, but if you go after Amazon, you get the Amazon checkout page. But if we find a common third-party dependency and we get 100 checkout pages, it's just been wild at the minute to watch how much damage you can do. We found one with the British government where they did cryptojacking, and it was a text-to-speech plugin for visually impaired people. You load the JavaScript, click the speaker, reads the page, and the third party was compromised, and they were running a crypto miner, but they were running it on like every government.gov site because all of them have the same accessibility requirements. If they compromised one application, it would have been one site, but now the supply chain is, they're usually not coming after you. They're usually coming after your supply chain. Yeah.
So I guess that to sum up that question, for us developers getting even more picky in the dependencies we choose, and actually doing an audit,
and that's what CSP forces you to do.
Yeah.
It forces you to do an audit. This is what I like about it. You have to sit down and say, oh, we load this JavaScript from here and this JavaScript from there. And people haven't done that before now because you put the script tag on the page and it loads and it works. And I don't need to write that down anywhere. It just works.
All right, that's it for us. So thank you so much, guys. We have a couple of minutes for questions, if there is anyone. I can't see shit, so now I know what the people at NDC say when I can see. Oh, thank you. Questions? Nei?
We'll be hanging around all day.
Not alle samtidig, som vi sier.
Okay.
All right.
Need some more information on the YubiKeys?
Yeah.
Come down afterwards.
Yeah.
If someone wants to have a look at one,
There you go.
There you go.
afterwards. So yeah.
I'll come get my stuff out now.
Question from Stavanger.
Yeah, so YubiKeys. I've seen blog posts about YubiKeys being hijacked during transportation. And then they alter the software and you basically have a man-in-the-middle attack on the YubiKey.
Yeah. Wow, that's like pretty keen to go after these things in transit, but
You scared him away now. Well done.
I'm going to show you. I want to show something when we afterwards. I'll do a quick demonstration, but I can get these things ready. But yeah, it's they're just like have you got the full size kind of? I can't remember. It's like Gen 2 device or something, isn't it? But this one here now in a laptop is like it barely protrudes out of the port. It's like a built-in. I mean, I can't even get it out because it's so small. It just goes into the port, and then you never. There you go. Like that's it.
It does require a USB port Type A.
Yes, they do Type C now as well. They have Type C keys. Finally, I've been hammering.
Size, I think.
No, they're probably about the size of this. Actually, I would say.
Or the key size.
Oh no, they do one that kind of like in the medium range now. Like it doesn't sit inside because you can't go inside USB-C. But yeah, I'll show that in a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.